Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. Here we are with episode 120 of Behind the Camera. As always, before we get into today's show, if you would like to follow Behind the Camera across social media, you can find my link tree in the description, which will take you to Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and also has a link to where you can buy my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. This is available in both paperback and ebook and is free to read if you have Kindle Unlimited. If you would like to see more of the behind the scenes side of the podcast, you can also support the show on Patreon. For £3 a month, you'll get access to extra content, including a Patreon exclusive series, your name added to the wall of patrons at the end of every episode of Behind the Camera, and much more. But now, getting into today's conversation. In what's likely one of the most unique blends of career I've come across in 2 years of Behind the Camera and probably in my entire life, my guest today is retired FBI special agent and former Baptist church pastor, Eric Robinson. And honestly, this was an amazing experience chatting with Eric. In terms of an introduction to this episode, there's really not much I can say that is going to do this conversation any justice. But what I will say is expect good human conversation, engaging stories, and some thought-provoking perspectives. But now, here's the interview. Eric, welcome to Behind the Camera podcast. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. How are we doing?
We're doing well. I appreciate being on with you, Andy.
That's my absolute pleasure. So, Eric, your career is one of very, very many interesting things. Let's say that's one thing for sure. So, a former pastor, retired FBI agent, and now author, which is certainly not a sentence I thought I was going to be saying anytime soon. But
at least not the first two. But after you say the first two, the third one kind of goes, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, that is very true. That is very true, and especially with being an author talking about experiences. But we will get to that. So, take us back to the beginning. How does one go from a pastor to an FBI agent? Let's talk about your background there.
Well, I mean, as far as the how goes, this was October of 2000 when I made the application, and the internet was not very robust at that time. So I was able to download I think 60 pages of forms you had to fill out of everywhere you've lived, every person you've touched since you were 16, extended family. So quite a bit to fill out. But I got to that point having been in ministry for a number of years. I was pastor of a Baptist church in Western New York, and I was successful. I was fulfilled. I enjoyed it. And yet the problem that I had, which I wasn't special from any other pastors, actually I was worse. I was incapable of leaving other people's burdens behind. So when the normal thing comes and they go, "Hey, pastor, I've got this problem," I carried that, and that led to stress-related headaches every single day without fail for 2 years.
Wow.
And even though I enjoyed what I thought I'd be doing this for another 50 years because you can do this as an old man, I had to do something different. So I told my wife I need to find a job with less stress, so I joined the FBI.
But I mean, we laugh about that, but I obviously did have a lot less stress considering 24 years as a special agent within the FBI, 15 years in SWAT. But one thing that you've just said is very interesting. It really, really interested me in terms of being a pastor, where you were unable to sort of let go when it comes to things that people had brought to you. Now, that actually is something that surprises me just on a general level, because I thought as a pastor or any former clergyman, that's part of your kind of responsibility for the people around you, is that, you do kind of take that kind of, I mean, I would have always thought it was part of the duty of care, but apparently no, it's just.
Well, there's some kind of balance that I was on my own. So I was the pastor and that was it. Nobody else. There's so many factors with it, but again, I wasn't special. The people coming to me weren't, they didn't have bigger problems than others. I just held on to them.
Yeah.
And and it was a different stress than the FBI, because obviously there's stress there too, not just physical demands, but there's, I mean, people are looking to kill you. So there's that.
Okay.
But I didn't care. It didn't matter. And the cue to me that I made the right decision was the day the FBI said, we'd like to bring you on, headache stopped.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, I don't have to do this. I've got something new. And then the FBI just felt like a much better fit. It was very comfortable for me, and I had a good time.
Yeah, amazing. So, what was your first role within the FBI then, especially bearing in mind coming straight from being a pastor as well?
Yeah. So my wife and I had done some schooling in the suburbs of Chicago. So I had Chicago, figuring I'd get a big city. I had a fairly high enlist. I got Chicago. So when my application was in process in 2000, I had studied Islam. I had trained to work with Muslims. And then 9/11 comes in 2001, and the FBI says we have an Al-Qaeda problem. I assume that had a role in them hiring me. And so they put me on a drug squad. So I started out working drugs for 5 years in Chicago, worked gangs, and then worked public corruption, all three of which are, Chicago's pretty well known for.
Yeah, wow. And like, was a lot of that work like office based, or were you in the field, like undercover roles, or kind of a bit of everything, really?
Yeah, so working drugs, I mean, I was one of two places. I was out on the streets with the team of people doing surveillance, or I was in the wire room, we called it, where we were on phone taps. We were on phone taps constantly. So, either supporting the phone tap or sitting on the phone and transcribing calls and getting on the radio telling people what they're doing. That was an amazing introduction to what the FBI was about, of getting in and already working at the highest level of our techniques of getting onto people's phones and listening.
Yeah, wow. And so just actually sort of just to scale back just like a little bit, what was it specifically about the FBI that made you apply there in the first place?
I never understand when people ask this. It's super cool. Like,
Well, of
don't you
course.
think? Right, it is. I this is what's crazy. I understand your question. I didn't have any law enforcement background. I never shot a gun.
Yeah.
Obviously I got proficient, but I just thought I need a new job. I don't even remember, because this is 2000s, 26 years ago. Uh, I just probably thought the FBI seemed like a really good thing. And look, my wife is way out of my league. Like, pretty girls aren't going to go out with you unless you ask them. So I thought, let me give it a try. And I got a date.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, completely fair. But like, I get what you're saying. Yeah, like, why wouldn't you apply for it? It does sound pretty
Yeah.
cool. And but obviously, like you say, it was a very, very different time back then. Obviously, because this was sort of 9/11 being the center of that. So like, you probably went in at the sort of right at the guts of so many changes and everything.
Yeah.
Crack down on so many things. Probably at their busiest time, really, over the last sort of, let's go back 30 years, and so then with your initial sort of few years there, were you stationed in different places, or was it mainly just Chicago, at least for the sort of first few years?
Yes. What's great about the FBI is, and it's gotten even better, where people have more mobility, but you can move around. You can change different types of investigative squads that you're on. For me, Chicago was a good enough place. I very quickly got tired of the big city and got to come back home to a smaller city in Ohio. So that was nice. But in the FBI, like, if you want to work overseas, you can get there. If you want to move up in management, you can go to DC. You can move around. For me, being an agent always seemed great, and I never understood why people would want to move from that. Like, I'd say, like, hey man, if you're at a dinner party and you tell somebody you're an FBI agent, they think that's cool. If you tell them that you're a unit chief, they're like, okay, what does that do? Like, this is what I want to do, and so it was good for me to stay in the field.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I think that's like one of the more interesting things about like that sort of level of law enforcement is the fact that there are so many sort of layers to it. There's so many departments and things that
Mm.
people just simply don't see. Like, I mean, I it's probably safe to say the majority of people's sort of exposure to it is what they might see on film and TV. But that kind of probably only barely scratches the surface, we'll say, of what it actually entails.
I estimate that I understand 75% of the FBI, and that's probably high
Hmm.
because I mean, there's every day, here a couple dozen years on, there's new things I would learn, positions I'd never heard of, techniques that a new agent comes in, says they taught us this. I'm like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. So there's there's so much that the FBI can do. And then you find somebody who has that connection, and then you go like, great, now I know that too.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. Like it is just like fascinating stuff. Like, because it's more than just like to infiltrate this gang. Let's kind of and overseas operations, etc., etc. And when it comes to sort of going between different roles, is that just a matter of you sort of relay your interest for doing these things, or do you get assigned particular things? What way does it work that way?
It's a little of both.
Yeah.
So I worked drugs in Chicago for 5 years. There were two drug squads. Then they dissolved my squad. I tell people it's because we had solved the drug problem. It was all maintenance from there on. But so here I am. Okay, forced. Now I'm directed to a new squad. Worked gangs for another year and a half, and then had a friend who worked civil rights and public corruption, saying, "Hey, you want to break from the late nights and long hours?" Like, yeah. Went over to that, transferred, and then get to move around a bit. I do 15 years of criminal work, and then I get told by my supervisor, "You're moving to counterterrorism." I'm like, okay. I, I guess long after I forgot everything, I get to put my degree to work.
Yeah, for sure. And what was counterterrorism like from your perspective?
Yeah, that's good to help people understand. So while I was working criminal work, we still had international terrorist issues, but things had died down. There's little pop-ups here and there, and at least to my familiarity, agents were working terrorist financing cases,
Hmm.
which were very difficult. They weren't on a terrorist per se here who's going to carry out violence. It's on someone who had an ideology who sent money overseas. And once that money goes overseas, it's hard to track it. So, we had a few cases that were successful. And then by the time I came to work on it, my first case, working national security, was on an individual who had given money to Anwar al-Awlaki, who was a designated terrorist for Al-Qaeda. He was their spokesperson. So he was funding a terrorist. But then to kind of ease me into my new role in counterterrorism, that case was he now, while he was waiting trial, wanted to kill his judge. So great, here's a murder for hire, which we worked up on him as well.
Hmm. Yeah, because counterterrorism, that does take on a lot of different forms. Like, it's not just what people might sort of think when they hear the word. They probably think what terrorist attacks, things like that. But like it does go like a lot deeper because like you say, you got domestic terrorism, for example,
Yep.
or anything that could really go anything that goes against the state is terrorism, technically, isn't it? Really, so that really kind of deepens what it really is.
Yeah, and we've had that pendulum swing. So we're getting off of international terrorism by the time I came on board, and now
Hmm.
we're swinging towards domestic terrorism, and then we'd work that. And these are knuckleheads who get together, form a boys club, talk violence, but nobody acts until one guy pops off in a drunken moment. And then I would go to my supervisor and say, "Hey, man, we're going to swing back. We need to keep our eyes on international terrorism." And so now we're focusing a little bit more that way, or well, we were till I left.
Yeah. So then, in terms of that, then in your particular role in counterterrorism, was there a lot of like monitoring individual people and their activity in comparison to sort of acting on what they were doing, for example?
Yeah, see, that's the difficult thing is we would get either a complaint from a citizen, from an
Hmm.
organization, somebody's posting threats, and we start to look at it, and if you give me 3 minutes, I'll find somebody online talking about violence, and so you have a limited ability to stay on someone who's got a freedom of speech. But if they're talking violence, okay, now we've got a little more time to watch them. And then so many of them, they just want to vent. And like, for example, we had many informants in on a group in the United States called Blood Tribe, which they were like major leagues
Hmm.
of white supremacists. Like they were the ones that people graduated to. And so many guys talking about how they wanted to carry out violence. Nobody did it. And then one individual did on his own while he was drinking, wanted to protect the children from a gay church. And so he firebombed it, which is highly illegal, and ended up scorching the side of it. That's it. But like, that's what we would have. You can watch that group, and then there would just be the one who, like, it's hard to determine who that's going to be. And you can take your shots without entrapping them of saying, do you want a gun? Are you going to do this? And follow on. But it's so difficult to find that one just before he does.
Yeah. Oh, of course. It's yeah, yeah. I think in that sort of instance, it just takes one rogue to
Yep.
go and do something, and then, I mean, obviously, one way to look at it is that's the first domino, because that then
Mhm.
exposes the rest of the group. Is that going to be the first sign of the entire group acting out, or and I'm sure it's probably regardless of what it is, a very delicate situation to sort of have to look at. And you mentioned informants as well. You would have dealt with a lot of informants over your time, and just to link this back to your time as a pastor and what you said at the start about not being able to let go of the things that people have said. Um, did that reflect then with in the informants, or is it because it was a completely contextual thing that it was easy to just let go?
Yeah, I don't know if it was. And I'll say this to just give a better idea. Like, part of being in ministry too is, and I know this was self-imposed, I had to be perfect. You know, I can't like bourbon and cigars. Well, here we are. You can't watch rated R movies with violence in them or anything. Like, and so there was that mask to have to wear.
Yeah.
So that made it difficult. But also in the FBI, I cared for my informants. I watched out for them. I cared when I had criminals that I knew we should indict and prosecutors would turn them down. But I was able to just move on because we've got there's plenty of
Yeah.
bad guys out there. Let's just move on to this one and get him.
Hmm. No, of course. Like, it makes sense, I suppose, because I suppose when you look at it, it's like a scale, isn't it? Really, like in terms of your local area versus citywide to potential,
Yeah.
international kind of, especially if informants, depending on what it might be. I'm assuming there'd have been a lot of like witness protection that you would have been involved with particular people, or would
Not,
informancy have been probably the sort of height of it?
yeah. I mean, we had occasions where a guy would get burned, like, or he would have to testify, and now maybe an organization knows him, and yeah, then the FBI is like, well, here, we'll give you $20,000. You can do what you want with it. We suggest moving, which, I hate to give law enforcement a bad name, but there's just so many times where informants get used. I tried to make sure that wasn't happening.
Hmm.
Where, I mean, most of these people, and I work with criminals that then were working off time too, but the rest of these guys they had no reason to work for us other than patriotism and, wanting to do what's right. So, I would hate to screw them. It's like, thanks for the $20,000. That doesn't really buy me a house.
No, I completely understand. Yeah, like again, it's probably something that's decided from the sort of the highest of the high, and just sort of how, yeah, because everything has to be sort of everyone has to be treated equally in some kind of ways, and depending on who they're giving up. And Something I've always been curious about, like, so let's go back to when you spent your time in Chicago working drugs and gangs, and like, if you have that level of involvement, is there ever the fear of the sort of being like recognized in like repeat cases, for example, by particular individuals or gangs who are connected?
I had, I remember being in Chicago. I used to enjoy going to the flea markets, huge swap meets. And I remember walking down an aisle with my wife, and I go, we may have to leave. I recognize that guy,
Oh wow.
Hispanic guy. And, we're working Mexican drug cartels. And I'm staring at him, and he's not seeing me yet. And then I see him walk around a corner, and then it hits me. Oh, yeah, he's with the DEA. So, there's, you know, I would keep an eye out in Chicago, less likely because
Mm-hmm.
the city's so huge. I had a kid who I arrested, I think it might have been 2014 or later, but he was a guy who then definitely wanted to kill me. And so because of that, after he got out of prison, when I parked my vehicle, which was in a public lot, and then walked to our building, first thing I did was scan the parking lot just to make sure. Wasn't afraid. Didn't feel like getting shot in the back of the head though, too. At least wanted to make this a fair fight. So there's times like that. I had one subject who was a financial criminal, and his wife kicked him out of the house, divorced him, and he ended up living in his sister's house, which was connected to our neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
So my kids are little, and now I'm walking them around to go trick or treating with a gorilla mask on, and the kids are wondering why I'm dressed up too. I'm like, yeah, I don't want them to see you with me.
Well, of course, and that's interesting because obviously, at the same time, you've got to live your normal life. You've got to go and do your day to day errands. You've got to do your groceries, all this, and but then at the same time, you never know who is right round the corner. But then in some ways, that's obviously like a two-way street as well, because like there could be sort of some notorious criminals doing the same thing, not knowing there's an FBI agent literally right on their tail inadvertently.
Well, that's the thing that opens my eyes to pretty early on in the FBI, and that is like you just start to see, like, we're focused on this criminal, and then he's going to the grocery store, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, they do normal human people things too, and then you're like, okay, and this one works here as well, and that guy works there as well, and you start realizing that slushy I just got might have been served to me by a criminal, because
Yeah.
I mean, they live human lives.
Yeah, like I can only imagine the sort of perception of life and reality as a whole that it gives you. Like, I mean, I have like number of friends who are like they just work in local police, but and again, this is something that I don't really understand too much, just because I'm not really that exposed to it. But the way they explained it to me was they see everything because they have to see everything, because
Mhm.
it's one of those jobs where they're never really off duty because of their duty of care. Like if something kicks off, and even if they're off duty, they have to assert their police presence. I'm not sure if it's the same in the States. I imagine it
Oh
is, or
yeah.
at least
Oh
close to. Yeah.
yeah. And you're looking, and you've gone to restaurants with them,
Yeah. Like I've took flights, gone to restaurants,
right?
done, yeah,
And
yeah.
and so you know which seat that they take each time, and if you take that seat, they'll ask you to move, which is back to the wall facing the door,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because they want to be able to see who comes in, what their face looks like. Is there a threat? Like if I was sitting down with another agent and he took that seat, I'm like, you better be on, because now I'm exposed.
Yeah. Like that's is such a fascinating thing, just of how eye open. I suppose as well how, like, normal everyday folks like myself have just sort of, you don't really kind of realize it. You take those kind of freedoms for granted sometimes. Like it really just is something else. And so for a long time in the FBI, you spent time as a SWAT operator. Am I correct in saying?
SWAT operator. My one of my analysts used to call us SWAT people, and I was like, well, it's okay. That makes us sound silly, like Lego men or something. But yeah.
So what was that like? And was that like the sort of Well, obviously, when people hear SWAT, they just think you're busting down a door, and you're. Was it really just simply like that, and or was there a bit more to it than just that?
Oh, well, yes, there's a whole lot more to it. I was one of the breachers, so I got to bust down doors. Uh, there's nothing better than that.
I was
That's the
gonna say that's
greatest thrill.
probably the safest part of it too, when you think about it, because everyone else is coming in after you, are they not?
No,
Oh,
it's
really?
the, no. I'm the most important person on the team because if the door doesn't get open, we can't get the job done.
Not true. True.
But I'm the least valuable because I'm standing in front of a not bulletproof door with my side exposed and no gun in my hand. So I've got to
Uh,
hit it, be quick, get out of the way where guys get in. Yeah, it's actually the most exposed that you could be. But the tactics that we had when I started on SWAT, it was use speed, surprise, and violence of action. So boom, get in there, standing on the guy's chest before he wakes up. And then the tactics consistently developed to where we got to a place where we were prioritizing safety of operators as well as the public, where we're doing a surround and call out, staging ourselves where we need to be. Tech got better. We've got drones. We have ability to breach windows, so we can send things in. So it got to be a safer place. And then there were times where, okay, got to bust a window, got to bust a door manually, like old school.
oh, wow, okay. Because would have always thought that it just was, tried and tested methods stayed the same, where it was just bust the doors down, guns blazing, almost like like again. I don't like to use the example film and TV, but that's for me personally what I have to go on. You know what I mean? But
Well, I mean, if you watched most of our, it would still be cool. But if you watch what we did, it
uh,
doesn't translate well to film where here's 15 guys making a tactical L to cover a house. And we get on a loudspeaker and one of the negotiators calls a guy out and he comes out with his
mm,
hands up. Well, that's kind of dull.
well.
Although dull makes me go home at night, so that's fine then.
Of course, yeah. I am actually still shocked though about when you're the breacher. Like I mean, obviously it makes sense when you said that is it's obviously valuable, but one of the most exposed. But I think because I had in my head it was where as soon as you got that door down, now this is very much dependent on whether they're expecting or not, like what kind of raid it is. But
Right?
if the SWAT team are called in, I suppose there's already
It's
a
heightened.
scene kind of already going on. Like there's probably already a negotiation in place.
That can happen. Usually it was an investigation is taking place. They say Tuesday we're going to arrest or execute a search warrant. Hey, this guy hits certain marks on a threat matrix, violent history, weapons, cameras, dogs, difficult terrain. Okay, all right. Agents could do it, but now we're going to send SWAT.
hmm.
We had better training because we were regularly trained, and then some tools that agents didn't have, which allowed for more safety.
Hmm. So was a SWAT raid one of the sort of highest levels of escalation in terms of resolution?
Yeah, and it was the difference between the FBI and police is police officers are just here you go. I'm going to put a blindfold, spin you, and here's your situation. We typically could control time and location, and therefore we had an advantage. I mean, that made it sucks for the police, better for us. I'm sure they would want the same advantages we have, but they just got to respond. So we would say, here's a 15-month investigation. It's coming down this day. We're preparing. We've done site survey. We've got all the plans. Everyone knows their role. Tools ready, and now we know these are the first four of the door. These are the next three. These are the follow-ons. And as much as we can, it's planned out to lower that need to make a decision on the spot.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So then, outside of the actual sort of raids themselves in a SWAT team, what's the sort of general day to day? Is it like constant preparation per potential raid or per case, or a lot of training? What's the sort of behind the scenes, if you will, based on that?
It's someone sitting at their desk swearing at their computer screen. That's That's if you did a true movie about a day in the life of the FBI, it's rated R for FBI. It's rated R for language
Wow.
because something's not working right, or it comes up and it says you need to change your password. Like, oh my gosh, I don't remember what my password was. It filled it. Like crazy things like that. Guys on the phone with the help desk saying, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm reading my password off a Post-it note and it doesn't work. And then you're writing reports. You're doing the, getting in the computer, finding backgrounds on people, working with analysts and such to, find who these guys are, monitor what they're doing and saying. And it all depends on what violation you're working too. Because like if you're on drugs, you're out on the street, and here you go, doing surveillance, doing buys.
I love the contrast between the fact that you are right at the front line there one night, busting down a door potentially, and obviously even going even further, compared to the next morning you're just sitting at your computer writing up. Like that is such a like I think in terms of contrast, that's about as real life as it gets. That's incredible. And so what's then the training like for becoming a SWAT operator? Because of how intense it seems to be. Like I imagine the training is only really matches the level of intensity.
So I had the fortune working out of Cleveland division. The best people I've ever met are in the FBI. The best people in the FBI are on the SWAT team. And these are guys willing to sacrifice and protect me and the guy next to me. So the instructors were good. We rotated well. Guys would go to trainings, come back with knowledge learned. And so we had a weekly training. And then we pretty much, our tempo was one operation a week at least. And that's, and then you're going back to your desk and doing your field work. And so you're getting to, at least on SWAT, a high proficiency level. So that meant I never felt fear in these life and death situations and guys opposing us violently, because we were competent and I knew what I was going to do. And I knew the guy next to me was at least as good as me. And so that just, it makes you only concern yourself with what's my next move? Do I have the tools to do it? When do I go? And it became almost robotic in a positive way of like, I move here, my side's exposed. This guy slides in without even a call because he knows there's exposure. And so he can put his vest and gun to oppose anything that might harm me.
That's incredible. And I suppose because obviously it's that well calculated and, in terms of movement down to who is where, whether it be within your unit or even perpetrators as well, like who's where. It's very much a well-oiled machine. And, you compared it to police raids, for example, where it's just a blindfold spin you around and like, but again, I suppose like there's probably that kind of less calculation that goes into that, because that's very much a case of they get word of, for example, a particular like drugs, for example, in a particular area, they have to go. They don't know who's really going at any given time. It's really kind of a case of who's close by. Whereas, when it comes to something like the difference of something in a local area versus like some millions and millions being trafficked across borders, I suppose, like in your case.
Yeah. And for us, like the difference is for police, whoever's closest shows up. For us, we've talked it through. I know the other 14 guys who are on it and where they are in the stack. Like, the FBI usually has that ability to say, this is how we're going to handle it. And that's with SWAT, and that's at the squad level too. So like, who's in, who do you need to borrow from another squad? When are we doing it? What role does each person have? And then agents are able to handle those same situations. It's just that they don't have as much as like that regular training that SWAT does, but many are easily as capable too.
Yeah, of course. So like regardless, then the kind of margin of error is still minimized to the point where you can still feel confident, even if you don't necessarily know a lot of the people who are in your unit, for example.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That is awesome. So, obviously, since having retired from the FBI, you have undertaken becoming an author with your book "Preacher to Breacher," a memoir of your experience at the FBI and everything like that. So, tell us about the book first of all, like, and about sort of how this came to be.
Well, the book is, uh, I liken it to what would happen if, like, this evil social scientist said, I'm going to take this Baptist pastor who's never handled a gun, and we're going to stick him in the FBI for 24 years, and let's just watch what happens. And so that's the thread that runs throughout the book of, like, I was not in the military. I was not a cop. I was a preacher. And so now I come into the FBI, and I never lost that fascination from the beginning of, this is amazing that I get to do this. And especially near the end of my career, where now there's some more appreciation of, wow, I work cases that won attorney general's awards. I've been in, I estimate, like 1,000 arrests and search warrant clears. Like, I got to do a lot. And I think people who would read my book can place themselves in that same thing, because I'm just every man who got to do, I Forrest Gump my way through life, and was very fortunate. And I think people can say, that could have been me.
Sure, yeah, like that's it would certainly make a good movie. Like the premise of that, like that's incredible. And so, like, whenever you then decided to write the book, obviously, you since retired from the FBI, at what point did you realize, okay, this is the time um to sort of step down here and sort of settle down?
Yeah. It was before I retired that I started writing it. I was nearing,
Okay.
and I talked to my wife. My wife has worked 14 years in marketing authors, and so I think it was probably, should have been an expected response, where I said, "Hey, what should I do?" And she said, "You should write a book." So I sat down at the computer, and the stories just flowed, because that's what agents do. Like,
Yeah.
there's downtime. We're waiting on an informant. There's a barricaded situation. If you don't have to be focused, guys are telling stories.
Yeah.
And so, let me tell this story about this time, and give that full breakdown. And then in each chapter where I cover an investigation or a couple that are like, I follow on with an after action review, which is familiar to military and law enforcement. And that is, hey, now we're going to sit down after, and we're going to say, we did this well. This is where we screwed up. Here's what needs to be
Hmm.
changed. And so looking back at that case, then, like, hey, this is how we were successful, or this is why we were lucky that nobody died. And given that review, maybe telling a few more stories as well. But I, I'm amazed at the kind of things that I got to do over 24 years. So I think people be tickled. Plus, I throw in a little humor. I've got an entire chapter of where I've made men poop themselves. So I think that may sell more books. It may sell fewer books.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, like, but I think that that's the sort of interesting part of it, because it really gives a good insight into this is what life is like for somebody in the FBI, for somebody who has done so much and has all that kind of experience. And like, I've spoken to people within law enforcement on the podcast before, and just in different kind of ways in the branches of the army and the military, police, etc. And I don't think I've ever spoke to anybody who hasn't absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, just because of there's so much that you can do that is, and it, but the one of the more fascinating parts of it for me is that, like, you know, you're putting your life on the line pretty much, every day, but that's the one of the last things on your mind, because, well, you're just doing your job, you're
Yeah.
enjoying it, and it's yeah, it just is like a completely different way of life.
Well, and if you're open to it, like, you're exposed to so much more. So I'm meeting people I would never meet.
Yeah.
They're different class, they're different race, they're different nationality. They think different than me. Oh, I get to meet them, good and bad, victims, witnesses, criminals. And getting to see how people live. And just so you know, it's all bad. When you go into a criminal's house and you've got access to every corner and you're in his phones and computers, you're like, wow, never thought people were into that, but I guess they are. And so it is a real social experiment of just, I have access to know you. I spend 3 years investigating you. So now by the time we meet, I know so much about you and you're just meeting me for the first time. And that's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's when you put it like that, it's quite mind blowing, like, but but then surely, when you say you're doing 3 years investigative work on a particular gang, and the head honcho, and you there in front of him, have you ever been like sort of taken by surprise by certain characteristics of them, like there's so like that research cannot sort of prepare you for?
Absolutely. So what's crazy is like you work with some of these gang members. They've had probably more interactions with police officers than I had at that point. And it's so much different than many of the other criminals. Like there's people who are throwing up, fainting, pooping themselves. Like this is shocking to them. And with the gang members, it's Wednesday. Whatever, man. I've done this before. So I get onto a squad, the gang squad, and they already had a roundup ready where they're arresting a bunch of gang members. So they give me this one guy. So I go, great. I arrest him. I bring him in. When you do the post-arrest interrogation, at least for me, I'm doing my homework. I've got a line of attack down. I've got evidence ready when we're going to bring it in. So I sit down with him and I start with, I figure we got to begin with something easy. So it's a photo of this guy's face right here that was taken from a button camera on an informant's drug buy with him. Slide it to him. I said, let's start with this. Can you recognize this man? And he goes, nope. Okay, well, it's you. He says, no, it ain't. And I go, oh, geez. You can see over his shoulder, it says 2255. And I get his wallet. It says, your driver's license. You live at 2255, 16th place. He's like, no, I don't. Like, okay. Well, the man in the photo is wearing a necklace that says Doe. You're wearing that same necklace right now. He goes, no, I ain't. And I don't even know where to go. He had me. I mean, this guy was good.
Oh, that is. And I suppose there's only so much pressing you can do before you just have to be like, right, well, we got to take you somewhere.
Yeah. And that was it. Like I've spent hours in interrogation with guys, breaking them down. They're crying. They're admitting to everything. They're admitting to stuff we don't even know. And then there's these guys are like, and that's exactly it. Like, you can go ahead and talk to the police. Just don't admit to anything. Like, nope. He was getting more out of me than I got out of him.
That's incredible. Like, and I think, especially when you mention the amount of research you do into persons, like so much about them, but then
it doesn't matter.
Can all change. Yeah, that can all change because I suppose when you're doing the research on them, you're really you're looking for all the inhumane, the negative, the sort of, the things to catch them for. Like, and obviously the odd sort of, normal thing will come up, I'm sure, but like that doesn't really translate until you're standing in front of the person. And then I'm sure there's probably like times where it's like, you think, I can't believe that, this person is, obviously you have to have that kind of level of separation, but when you look at it on like a human level, I'm sure it's kind of mind blowing for yourself.
Well, there always had to be just a professionalism about it. So, I'd work with plenty of pedophiles. So, I talked, like even cops along with civilians would say, like, I don't know how you can interview them. I would just want to put a bullet in their head. I'm like, yeah, but I got a job to do.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, I'm going to set that aside. I'm not going to show disgust. These guys don't need me to tell them that they're monsters, they're horrible. they already think they are.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in and I'm going to treat them with humanity because that's going to get me further. That's going to get me what I want. Since I know I'm not going to assassinate him, I want to see him spend time in prison. So that's easy. I can do that. I can treat him nice, get him to open up. And I know that's going to ultimately be more. So whoever I was working with, you have to find some type of connection, some commonality that you can now normalize for yourself so that you can treat them with a type of humanness.
Yeah, of course. Because like, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it is humans that you're catching. There is,
Yeah.
and as humans, every single person there's a relatability aspect, and
Somewhere.
you know, somewhere, even throughout all of the sort of dark stuff I'm sure you've dealt with people at the end of the, you know, and I think sometimes it does come back to, like, you know, the basic levels of psychology, where if you treat somebody like a human, then even the most hardened people, you'll get what you want out of that, because that's probably something that they have lacked for a lifetime. You know.
Yeah. And when I didn't feel the need to slam tables or yell, because I already came in with 12 of my buddies pointing guns in your face, breaking down your door, putting handcuffs on you, telling you you're going to go to prison. Like, do you need me to show you that I'm in charge more? No. Like, I know I'm in charge. You know I'm in charge. Let's bring it down to a conversational level now.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure that probably quickened like the process up so many times with so many different people, because, like, I mean, I'm sure a SWAT raid, if you're on the wrong end of it, is probably traumatic enough for most people, unless it's like the type of people that you mentioned, where for them it's just Wednesday.
So I mean, we had one where my job was to port the windows, so I'm shooting rounds of a rubber device from a 40 millimeter gun. And so I'm knocking out the window so we can send drones in. This guy was a gang member. He thought his house was getting shot up. So, you know, he immediately throws his girlfriend on the ground out of bed, and, you know, he comes out. That guy was very compliant now because, again, he thought he was dying. He thought he was going to get killed. And fortunately for us, that did the job.
Oh, amazing. No, it is very fascinating to really kind of hear the human side of, you know, what it is that goes into, you know, FBI work and everything like that. So just a very quick note then on the book Preacher to Breacher, is still due to come out? When can we expect this to launch?
So the book will be out in October. The title is Irreverent. From saving souls to chasing sinners in the FBI. So a little play on the reverend part, on irreverent, and I assume people can kind of get the irreverent just from our discussion here. And they can find that on my website, which is preachertobreacher.com.
Apologies. That's where I was.
That's fine. But you got to admit, that's a good name. That's a good name for a website.
Yeah. I mean, it says everything that it needs to, and yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the book myself. Like, I mean, obviously the stories that, you know, we've talked about probably don't even scratch the surface either. So
we get in depth, and what I'm also hoping to do too is to get some of the agents, as we do the audiobook, get some of the agents who've been involved in these cases to add a little bit. It came to me just the other day as I was driving past one of our correctional institutions of like, hey, I've got a terrorist who's in that prison. I might want to see if I can get him to tell his side of the story as we caught him for. I mean, that'd be great. So
that's it. The possibilities are endless. And do you think that this might just be like a one and done, or do you think this kind of opens the door to maybe a few more installments in the future? What sort of plans have you got?
Well, here's my notes, you know, from, you know, for the next book of cases that I'm like, oh, I remember that one too. So we'll see. We had a lot of things to do.
And that's the amazing part about a memoir, is that, like, you know, the more experience you have, the more stories you can remember. There's so much you can do with it. So much you can do with it. But yes, Eric, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera podcast. Thank you so much for your time. And yes, For the listeners at home, be sure to check out preachertobreacher.com, and apologies again for getting that wrong. It's whenever I did look at the website for the book, that was the first thing I seen, so my apologies.
No problem.
And Irreverent coming out in October. But once again, thank you very much, Eric, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.
And there you have it for episode 120 of Behind the Camera. Huge thank you to Eric Robinson for being today's guest, and be sure to check out www.preachertobreacher.com to keep up to date with Eric's latest content, link in description. As always, thank you to all patrons for your support. You're all truly appreciated. And of course, if you would like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, check out my link tree in the description for all socials and for my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. Thank you for listening, for the support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.